Dr. Intan Azura Mokhtar.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank Minister Heng Swee Keat for sharing with us Budget 2018. It is a prudent and inclusive budget that aptly focuses our attention on providing for the underserved and the elderly, and looking at how taxes can help supplement government revenues so that we are able to fund much needed and increasing social spending. I support the budget, but I also wish to speak on 3 areas that I feel we need to take a closer look at, whether in this budget or future ones. These areas are 1. Older workers, 2. Women in flexi work, and 3. Making taxes even more progressive. Older workers. In an earlier sitting this month, some of our esteemed members in the House filed a members' motion on the elderly, which is timely. I had the privilege of speaking on the motion, and I wish to reiterate some of the points I raised then here. Sir, the elderly among us is largely an untapped source of invaluable knowledge, experience, and human resource. While I applaud the numerous schemes, programs, and initiatives to retrain older workers to help them reskill or cross-skill or dip-skill, what they also need are beyond skills and training. More importantly, our older workers need opportunities. Opportunities to be given continued employment or job redesign, or even opportunities to be mentors to younger workers. The amount of knowledge, wisdom, and experience they have garnered over years of working should be put to better use, specifically for younger workers to learn from. To elaborate, for older workers who may not be able to carry on with the work that is rather physically demanding, they can undergo job redesign to become mentors or trainers to younger workers. The organization they work in can redeploy them as mentors or trainers who are able to train within the context and institutional knowledge of the organization and be granted SkillsFuture grants for employee training, rather than engaging external training vendors who may deploy trainers who lack the experience, the contextual understanding, or institutional knowledge of the organization. Another example is to retrain our older workers who are keen to explore working in a different industry, to be trained as early childhood teaching assistants or educarists, for example. I've brought this up before in this House. Personally, I believe that older persons have much more patience to work with young children compared to their younger counterparts. Other than patience to nurture and help take care of the young children, it also provides the older persons an opportunity to laugh at the antics of the young ones and feel young again. In 2016, Bangor University in the UK carried out an experiment in letting the elderly in a seniors daycare centre and young children in Plant Persiaw Nursery in Carnarvon, Wales, a childcare centre, to interact and spend time together over several days. It was found that for the seniors, they felt happier and had a better sense of well-being. For the young children, significant benefits were: 1, there was an improvement in learning language, particularly dialects, in this case it was Welsh, and 2, a boost in their confidence levels. This was because the children had almost undivided attention and encouragement by their elderly friends as they played. I am heartened that our government is already piloting the co-location of childcare and elderly care centres over the next few years. However, I would also implore the government to ensure the employment of more older workers in these dual service care centres. There are many jobs that provide meaningful work for older Singaporeans to do, be it in mentoring, training, or caregiving, beyond menial work such as cardboard collecting or cleaning jobs that some of our seniors feel they are destined to do once they reach their late 50s or early 60s. On the subject of continued employment of older workers, I would urge the government to review the CPF contribution rates for employees above 55 years old. Currently, once a worker hits 56 years old, the employer's CPF contribution is slashed from 17 to 13%, while the employee CPF contribution is cut from 20 to 13%. In total, there is a drastic cut of 11% CPF contribution overall. That is a huge cut when you cross 55 to 56 years old. I would propose that the CPF contributions not be cut until much later, say when they are at least 60 years old. It does not make sense that when our average life expectancy is at least 80 years old, our CPF contribution rates are cut at 56 years old. It is too premature. Alternatively, if not cutting the CPF contribution rates may render our older workers less attractive to be employed, then at least make the reduction progressive over 4 or 5 years, rather than the drastic 11% cut in just over 1 year. With more Singaporeans marrying later and having children later, it is quite inevitable that at age 55 or 56 years old, we would still be supporting school-going children and elderly parents, as well as financing our housing loans. Women in flexi-work. The proportion of women who are actively working has been almost constant, around 60% for the past few years. In comparison, the proportion of men who are actively working is around 75%. There are various reasons that women may choose not to work or be employed. These reasons range from childcare or elderly care responsibilities to the decision to have a better work-life balance and work from home on a flexi-work basis. Whatever the reasons, sufficient support must be given to our women in managing their numerous responsibilities. In addition, we need to continue our push to ensure better parity between men and women, be it in terms of salaries earned or in terms of familial responsibilities. Men cannot be expected to always earn more than women in the household, and women cannot be expected to always take care of the family more than the men. Another concern that I have is that women are still not seen as a valuable source of manpower in the workplace. Looking at the manpower statistics of 2017, there are still more women earning lower salaries compared to men. I will speak about this in the COS debates. While salaries are competitive and are based on merit and experience, there is still much that the government can do to lead by example in closing the income gap between men and women, and in changing the perception of what women and men are capable of doing in the workplace. For instance, there can be more women appointed to senior civil service or administrative service positions, the boards of companies and organizations, and even as ambassadors to other countries or to international organizations. Other than appointments, the government would also need to lead by example in allowing for more flexi work for public sector and civil service employees, for both male and female employees. Currently, flexi work is more widely accepted in the teaching service. This would send two very significant signals. One, that flexi work is acceptable and can still render effective contribution at work. And two, that flexi work is meant for both men and women, so that they are able to better manage work and familial responsibilities. 3, making taxes more progressive. Taxes seem to weigh heavily on the minds of many Singaporeans, even in the lead-up to the budget announcement. Many have been worried about possible increase of the goods and services tax and an increase in personal or corporate income tax rates. I am aware that the last increment in personal income tax rates came into effect for year of assessment 2017, where those whose assessable income is more than $320,000 are taxed 22%. Comparing similar economies as Singapore, that is Taiwan and Hong Kong, there is room for personal income tax rates for high-income earners to increase. In Taiwan, those whose assessable income is between Singapore $105,000 to almost Singapore $200,000, they have to pay a personal income tax rate of 30%. Those whose assessable income is more than 200,000 Singapore dollars would have to pay a maximum personal income tax rate of 40%. In Hong Kong, the maximum personal income tax rate is 17%, and this is applicable to those whose assessable income is more than Singapore $300,000. Hence, I feel there is room to increase the personal income tax rates for higher income earners. For instance, those whose assessable income is more than $320,000 and up to $500,000, they can be charged a personal income tax rate of 22%. Those whose assessable income is more than $500,000 and up to $1 million can be charged a personal income tax rate of 24%. Those whose assessable income is more than $1 million can be charged a personal income tax rate of 26%. In comparison, in Malaysia, the maximum personal income tax rate is 28% for those whose assessable income is more than 1 million ringgit, or 335,000 Singapore dollars. Another comparison, in Taiwan, the maximum personal income tax rate is 40% for those whose assessable income is more than $203,000. Other than increasing personal income tax rates for higher income earners, the government can review the corporate income tax rates, particularly for multinational corporations or large firms. The current corporate tax rate for Singapore is 17%, flat. Comparatively, the rates for Taiwan is 17%, while that for Hong Kong is 16.5%. While it may make it less competitive for Singapore to increase our corporate tax rate across the board, we can consider making it more progressive. For MNCs or large firms, especially those that are earning annual revenues of more than $1 billion annually, which are among the top 1,000 earning firms in Singapore, they can be charged a higher corporate tax rate. These MNCs or large firms that are earning in excess of $1 billion annually can be charged a corporate tax rate of 17.5 to 18%. It is a small increase in order to keep Singapore globally competitive for businesses, but the revenue that can be generated to fund government expenditure and social spending is significant, even with this half to 1 percentage point increase. Since personal income tax has already been made progressive, corporate income tax should also be made progressive, rather than the current flat rate that benefits high-income earning MNCs or large firms significantly more than smaller firms. For the imminent GST change, I can understand the need for the increase. However, the GST increment should be made gradual. For instance, the GST can be increased 1% for 1 to 2 years, then another 1% for the next 1 to 2 years. This staggered increment will give people more time to adjust to the increased GST and better manage their finances and expenses. In addition, I would implore the government to look at how GST for e-commerce, especially in the buying and selling of luxury items such as branded bags and accessories, can be enforced and collected. While I do not have the data on this, I believe there is a substantial amount of revenue lost through e-commerce transactions, especially for large quantum amounts involving branded items. There is still room for tax revenues to increase to fund higher and increasing social spending, and I hope the government will explore the suggestions I have made, even if not for this year's budget, then for future ones. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I support the budget.